See, he's answering the question. Because God's love has been poured out into our hearts through the Holy Spirit that's been given to us. Last week, we celebrated the gift of the Holy Spirit, the breath of God, that was breathed upon those early Christians on that very first Pentecost Sunday. We also noted last week that in the Gospel of John's accounts, John's favorite word for the Holy Spirit is the Comforter. The Comforter. So in today's passage, Paul is stating with the utmost confidence that the Holy Spirit, the Holy Comforter, infuses, just like with the tea infuser, the Holy Spirit infuses into us a hope that will not disappoint. Christian hope, that is, Holy Spirit inspired hope. Christian hope is grounded in something much bigger than any hope the world can offer us. Christian hope is a hope that literally transcends all suffering in this world. It's a hope that keeps us going even when all seems lost. And that brings me to a painting. In 1886, the artist George Frederick Watts created a famous painting entitled simply Hope, H-O-P-E. It now hangs in the Tate Museum in Great Britain, but throughout the years, it has inspired many, many people. President Teddy Roosevelt had a copy of that painting hanging in his house. Martin Luther King Jr. had that painting inspire a sermon that he wrote that was very famous. The sermon was entitled Shattered Dreams. And more recently, President Barack Obama used it as the inspiration for his book, The Audacity of Hope. Hope is audacious because it exists in spite of the circumstances that surround it. This painting is captivating. Hope you can see it up there. It's also deliberately ambiguous. We'll have to interpret it. So I'll give you my interpretation of this painting as you look at it. You can see there's an exhausted woman sitting on a globe, blindfolded and barefoot, with a musical instrument. It's an ancient lyre. See it back there? An ancient lyre nestled in her arms. And if you look closely at the instrument, it appears to have lost all of its strings but one. Now, the image of this woman cradling this instrument, this damaged instrument, this instrument with one string, made me wonder, what had she encountered in life? Had she experienced life as a series of struggles? Maybe a series of failures? And now she's holding on to the one remaining thing she possesses that could give her hope, her musical instrument? Let's contemplate on that possible interpretation. You'll notice that all but one string on that ancient lyre is broken. But perhaps, if you're familiar with the violinist Paganini, Paganini had the interesting, some say it was staged, some say someone sabotaged his violin, Stradivarius, of course. But on performance, the strings all broke but one. And he continued to play. In fact, after that, he wrote two pieces. The one I'm thinking of is Paganini's Moses Fantasy, which was deliberately written to be played, that is the entire piece, on only the G string of the violin. Can you imagine? You see the sheet music there? How would you like to play that on one string? Over Paganini, it was showmanship for him. He could do it. But it made me think that in our world, and I suppose it's always been this way, but we live in this world. In our world, there is so much cynicism. There's so much complaining about all the strings of our world that have been broken. But very little playing by those people on the one string that remains. We're focused on what we've lost, and therefore we forget to use what we still have. A string that can play beautiful music. In Watts' painting, that one remaining string gives the woman the ability to produce beautiful music. So rather than lamenting the strings that have broken, she can play the string that remains. With that one string, the future is a future of hope. Now, those who have had to suffer for a worthy cause, like Jesus or like the Apostle Paul who wrote today's text, those folks don't give up easy. Progress usually comes through suffering. Suffering which produces endurance. Endurance which produces character. And character which produces hope. A hope that does not disappoint. We must remember how, with only one string remaining, the U.S. and its allies defeated totalitarianism in 1945. And how, with only one string remaining, we were able to prevent a nuclear holocaust in 1961. Things surprise us if we just keep playing on that one string we still have. Now today, many of our farmers are suffering from the recent floods. In fact, in the interviews I've heard, they say it's going to be a long time before they simply recoup what they've lost, let alone get ahead. And that reminded me of an old story I heard growing up as a child. Now this occurred across the border into Kansas, but Kansas and Oklahoma Panhandle, pretty much the same out there. The story was told of this Kansas farmer who had toiled and produced a bumper crop. And in just a few days, the harvest would begin. But that night, there came a violent wind and hailstorm, which decimated the fields for miles around. The man stood there the next morning with his little boy beside him, surveying all the damage. And the little boy expected to hear his father just start cursing. He was filled with despair, obviously. But to the little boy's surprise, the father began softly singing, "Rock of Ages, cleft for me." The little boy grew up, and when he was an adult, one of his favorite things was to say, "That was the greatest sermon I ever heard."